Okay, so we were introducing ourselves, and due to the research that we're doing, we are not only doing projects, but we are doing also academic works and producing research work through different mediums, some exhibitions, conferences and seminars like this one we're attending. And we are continuously publishing our work. So if you guys are more interested in the things that we're doing, you can follow us online and check our works. So today we are a little bit give a broader introduction of the research topic that we are always revolving around and how that affects all the work that we're doing, and also is affecting the mappings and how we are looking at the sites. So we are talking about the open project, that it will be something that for some of you is already presented and you know a little bit about. But because this open project somehow is the very foundation of all the research work we are doing, and how we are understanding the urban context, the landscape context, and the architectural context that we are working in. So our Earth that we are living on is constantly changing and is a dynamic mechanism. No, it's not static but dynamic. So therefore, it's constantly, there's this question of our role as spatial designers within the projects that we are producing and we are designing in the office. And within this design process, somehow that we are producing, we are understanding or trying to understand constantly this fluctuating dynamics of Earth and how it's important that we will also talk about mapping today. So
yeah. So this terminology that you are seeing here on the screen, some of the keywords that are emerging as we try to understand what's going on Earth and how we can contribute to this planet and that we are living in as designers. Doing that kind of right now, you're really trying to understand Marmara region, so to be able to produce that data, so that further on, how can we actually cope and relate ourselves with those existing systems, the natural systems, artificial systems, and how can we find a future together. So you see the keywords here: adaptability, indeterminacy, open-endedness, divergent or soft systems. We're coming across, and probably you're also coming across these words, these keywords every day more and more, and not only within our profession, but also in our daily media sources. I'm pretty sure whenever you are seeing a flood news or like the fire and the climate change, right? Like, all of these things are every day more and more embedded within our lives. It's no longer the place of the academicians and researchers only, but it's affecting us daily. And the effects of it in the media are very apparent. It's because the dynamic complexity of our environment is inviting us architects, designers, landscape architects to a transformed discipline that is characterized by contingency, immateriality, and blurry lines. So
so actually in this context, we believe that our traditional role as architects who draws like really definite and determinate lines is no longer valid, and we need to always question and which lines are we drawing, which lines are we enhancing, which lines are we not drawing, and we are making them disappear. It's a lot about mapping in that sense too. So our research and projects are constantly looking for the answers to this phenomena. However, it wouldn't be correct to refer to this investigation of the open project as something that belongs solely to this area. Many architects in the 60s and 70s came as the forerunners of this open systems campaign, and this is one of our favorite images that we use in all our seminars and all our presentations, because this image that you see here is the first photo of Earth that it was taken by the astronauts of the Apollo 8 missions, and it was transmitted back to Earth on December 24th of 1968, and it created a huge impact, you can imagine, everywhere in the world, because for the first time they were able to see, to see how our planet actually looks like from far away, and it looked very different to the world maps or that we were used to. There's no boundaries of country lines, but instead we see this intertwined, fluid, connected system that is flowing from one side to the other. So the 60s and 70s somehow marked the history with this emerging awareness of environmental issues and transformations in social structures in the Western world, and technological innovations, planetary dynamics, globalization, individualism, nomadism are some of them that we can mention. So the strategies that architects and designers were using in that era corresponded to a multitude of drastic changes, and I would suggest everyone to read soft systems of Sanford Quinter to deepen or to have a deeper understanding on this subject.
As you can understand, after seeing that image, right, and all the technological, political, social structure changes at the end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s, as Carlos said, we always talk about that photo and the impact that photo created on Earth. Being able to see Earth for the very first time, it was completely eye-opener, but at the same time, it changed the perspective, how everybody on Earth was perceiving the world, and especially for the designers, it created this question, right? As you have seen, all the clouds are moving, the air is moving around, the water is moving, everything is so fluid and so much in constant change. So how can you as designer, design something that is static, that is not open to change when Earth is constantly changing? And how can you understand that, right? So these were some of the very important questions that came right after 60s, 70s, and people and designers also, they were in search of, they were asking new questions, and they were in search of answers for these questions as well. So in the early 90s, as Carlos said, Sanford Quinter wrote the soft systems, and around the same times, academics and practitioners like James Corner, Charles Waldheim, or Stan Allen, in the 90s and beginning of the 2000s, they suggested to look at architecture through the lenses of landscape, to be able to render build system that works like artificial ecologies. They ask this question: would it be possible that whatever we are designing as humans are functioning just like the natural ecologies, but rather artificial? So they would be open to change, and they can also, withstand time, and they will flow with all the natural flows. Would this be possible? This was a main question, and their proposal as well. In that sense, they suggested that the architecture and the urban could manage the flows of energies, resources on a site, and direct density and distribution of a habitat, or they can modify in response to the changing environmental conditions. They can work with time, and they're open to change. I'm pretty sure, each summer or winter, doesn't matter at this point, we have these drastic weather situations right now, and the build systems that we are living in, that we have built, actually, they are not able to, respond to these changes of Earth. For example, whenever you hear a flood, again, this year there was heavy rains, right, in Istanbul, and then you hear all these floods. It's because the rivers, with all these rains, they were actually collecting all that water, and they were sucking all that water to the earth, releasing some to the sea. But currently they are not able to do that, because I always talk about it in our country, in other countries as well, but in our country, this is still İSKİ, ASKİ, all of them, they are still channeling all the rivers, and the river has this concrete size and concrete channel that is calculated for a 500-year assumption, and we don't even know if that 500 years is really going to be that way or this way. And then all of a sudden, the river is flooding. I mean, it's just, so as you can see, that concrete channel is a thing that is so static, that does not allow, these changes, that doesn't function with nature, doesn't respond to the changing environmental conditions at all, and is not open to change, and it cannot cope with it. And therefore, it creates disasters and crises all the time. So James Corner, early 2000s, he has this book that is called The Agency of Mapping. Definitely you should go and check it out as well. And also his maps. You are seeing here one of his maps. We're going to be showing some of his maps as well. In his book, The Agency of Mapping, he suggested map making to understand and to be able to frame the context. He suggested understanding the geography, the natural and artificial flows on it or in it, to be able to respond with a design system. So currently the part that you're doing in the workshop, even though maybe it's not a design proposal, maybe it's not going to go there, it's very, very important, because you need to set the basis, set that understanding, because if we do not really understand it, then we won't be really able to speak with it, right? Like, so imagine yourself as those like very important researchers that has this huge responsibility. So because he was suggesting that mapping is about searching, finding and unfolding the complex and hidden forces there, but they are not really visible to the naked eye. You really need to go and discover and see those relationships that are kind of like hidden, and otherwise, those parts, they would look like separated from each other. But the moment you start seeing the relationships, you understand how actually connected they are. So that's why mapping was suggested by James Corner as a tool to actually understand and kind of like translate the data, the information onto the geographical space. And here you're seeing some of the maps, and this is actually a small note that we have prepared previously for Aura, and we wanted to also show you this. Maybe you already have it. If you don't have it, maybe you can do like a screenshot of this right now. And here I want to just like read a small portion of this for the mapping, because like James Corner is actually coming up with kind of like a manifesto, and you can look at it more in detail. But he's talking about the 3 essential operations of mapping. And number 1 is creating of a field, right? Setting of rules and the establishment of a system. This, you're looking in Marmara to certain regions, right? And in those certain regions, you are trying to understand actually what field is that? Is that a water field? Is that a soil field? Is that a energy field? Is that an agricultural field? Is that an industrial field, right? Kind of like trying to understand and see what that field is. The second is the extraction, isolation, or deterritorialization of parts and data. So this is quite important, trying to understand those different layers of information that is hidden there. Because the thing is, the data that's, when you go to any kind of place on Earth, and when you look around, the data around you, doesn't matter if it's an urban space or it's a forest completely, you are in a very, very complex place, and understanding that complexity is also very complex. So to make the job a little easier, what he's suggesting is extracting and isolating some of the layers so that you can actually pinpoint that data and see those relationships, right? Later, we're going to be showing some examples. And the third one is the plotting, the drawing out, setting up of relationships, re-territorialization of parts. So this is about, when you start researching and you have mapped those parts, and all of a sudden you zoom out and you look at the map one more time, and you see that actually those things that you were thinking as different parts, they suggest a connection in between. Okay, we will also see that later with an example too. But here, the map maker's contribution to the map is very, very important. You are the one who's telling the story, who's finding out the data, and then who then puts it on the geographical space and tells something about it, right? Like, so map maker, which is you, is also very important. So how you engage with that map, what you see, what you have tasted, is going to give you the clues to be able to, take that personal experience into an experience into something that is related with data. And then we can all commonly talk about it. So it's not something that solely belongs to your private memory. Okay. And now
I think there's also, now that you're zooming here, there is a really important note there that says maps allow for speculation and revealing new relationships to occur. I think that's like, if you have clear what is the aim of the map, and that should be the aim of any map. Like, you're gonna pick, each one of you as a map maker is gonna pick certain informations that you are gonna put together into a space that we'll speak a little bit later about how you spatialize that information, because that's map making at the end of the day. But those relationships that are hidden relationships that are not apparent when we are looking at them with our eye, you can enhance those relationships in a map making. And that's why maps are somehow abstract too. Like, it's not a direct representation of what is the existing situation. It is the existing situation, but there are peak points. I think that's what makes a map really, really speculative, and you see these relationships in between. So right now we're gonna see some of our, it's not fully our project, but you're gonna see parts of our projects and how this all affects all this map making research. We do research and then we turn it into, we specialize that research into mappings. So first, we would like to start with our project in Buyukada that some of you may know, that we won last year the competition, and right now we are developing the construction project in the Phaeton Maidana and Phaeton Square, where the horses used to be. And even though this Phaeton Square seems like a really, really small square, if you think about it in an Istanbul context, when we evaluate this square on the Istanbul scale, and due to its location, history, past, and potential future, this small place as an area can create a multi-scalar effect. Because of this actual reason, from the beginning of the project and the research that we were doing, we tried to understand the multilinearity of the square with the intertwined relationships in between Buyukada and the rest of the other Prince Islands that are next to it. So Buyukada is the biggest island and is the most central island of all, not only because of its size, but also because of its administrative role and public programs that offer not only to the to Buyukada Island, but to the other islands in the system. So Phaeton Square posits a critical point that can define the future course of all the islands, and which are currently under pressure from the monolithic tourism economy that comes to the island and multiplies, I don't know, on the weekends and in summers 3-4 times its population. So it brings a loss of identity and this homogenization of the tourism economy, and it changes pace of the place in a really radical moment. So therefore, we thought that any decision that it will be taken about the square in Buyukada is not only for Buyukada Island, but for the rest of all the other islands. And of course, to fully grasp and to fully understand the impact of this idea, the larger scale reading and analysis of the island was really necessary. So researching a wide range of historical readings, old engravings, we looked at maps, stories of people, different types of drawings, statistical data, environmental analysis data, mining data, land ecosystem data, transportation data. I mean, we look at absolutely all the ranges of information that we were able to access. And we try to gather our findings onto two maps in this case. So one is showing the soft systems, and the other one is showing the hard systems of the island. So one will be focusing on the ecologic aspects of the island, and the other one, it will be focusing on the urban system. So for example, you see here the ecologic system map, which specializes, which is really important. All that information that we have looked through the research, there are text, numbers, images. We have to specialize it. We have to put it on a drawing. And in this case, all the statistical, numeric, biological, environmental data turn out into this map. And the image you are researching about probably has a lot of information too. You are mapping some certain areas, and you will be able to access all that information, but that information has to be translated into the actual space. So you still see the island somehow. And here is the other layer that I was speaking about, the urban system layer. And in both of them, both of the layers, we are separating them to be able to see those hidden relationships that we were mentioning before much more clearly. So you can choose the layers that you're showing if those layers are showing something that is a potential or a problem or a finding. So we have seen, for example, in how the transportation system in the northern part of the island has urbanized this northern part with settlements, whereas, for example, in the southern part of the island is completely ecologically segregated because of the direct reason, the boats are going to the main pier that is in the north of the island, not on the south. So this kind of decisions that they seem really obvious, they become more obvious when you are selecting the layers of the project. So by understanding these multi-scalar relationships of the Phaeton square, we try to think and design the square not only for the close surroundings of the entire Uyukada, but for all the other islands. And this was only possible if we were understanding all the connections that the actual Phaeton square has with the surroundings and with all the other islands, potentials and problems. So we have tried to answer these questions with some sort of a design mechanism that proposes an intertwined way of engagement with public space by introducing programs as a consequence of those superimposed layers. So these mechanisms allows flexible development, anticipates active participation of the people of the island and also not of the island, and conceives continuous and legible spatial organization for more interaction, and considers the significance of open spaces as public spaces, and addresses these issues in multiple program scenarios that will change the square in multiple ways of programs. So the reason that this square emerged from as an unplanned, so this square was not really planned, it was an urban void of buildings that they getting destroyed, and it's like an empty space, and it served as a main transportation node of the station of the island. So it was a parking and rotation space that it was hidden as a backstage away from the site, but constantly in preparation for the historically, socially, culturally rich acts of Uyukada's daily life. So we try to interpret the current transportation decisions, and opportunistically we try to explore the potentials of this backstage as Phaeton Square to transform into the main stage of the island somehow, and the main stage of the public life, full of programs and research abilities. So we propose this system of circuits. That all the systems that we propose, they have a upper scale that affects the entire island, but then they change the programs of each moment of the square. So you can see these circuits are routes, are thematic routes that are designed based on our research on the largest scales, and within each route the square acts as a switch, energy that can be channeled somehow through all the circuits. So for example, this route is the local production route, and the square acts as a collective urban workshop hosting programs like local products market or harvest festival, but it's coming from the idea of the broader scale where we saw the local production was happening, and that local production on other parts of the island can come to the square and show itself somehow. So we have all these layers that I'm going to pass really quickly: sports, health route, agriculture, gastronomy route, the same way that some restaurants or some gastronomic places in the island, they can come to the square and do a market once a month, for example, or some cultural events that are hidden happening in the back of the island. They can come to the square. Land ecosystem route, historic edifices and monuments route, and marine ecosystem route. So as you can see, this square that is constantly changing according to its relationship with these particular layers that we saw on the mapping, that we enhance on the mapping. You can see transportation relationships in all different layers of them, of the area, but it helped us to understand the island in detail, and also allowed us to propose a square design that is connected to the entire island in all the layers. So somehow you can see how the mappings and the research that we are doing, it has an effect on the decisions that we are taking in an architectural scale or in a closer scale of our projects. And
yeah, this one is another project that we are currently working on, and the construction also of the first phase started like 2 weeks ago. Again in Istanbul, this one too. And similarly, just like what Carlos said at the beginning of the design, again, like we wanted to understand Tuzla, right? Like to be able to respond to it with a project. Like, so the municipality asked for a project around the riverbanks of Tuzla, Umur River, and of course they were asking not for a project that is for the entire Tuzla. We're only asking for it in the southern part of the project. However, you know, when you're talking about a water system, and when you're talking about revitalizing and doing an ecosystem restoration, it's really important to understand that that small piece of water is actually connected to a much larger system. And, you know, if you are going to propose something for a small part of it, you should understand that you're going to be creating an effect, an impact that's going to be affecting a larger scale. So therefore, it's really important to understand, like, you know, what those parts are actually connected to in a larger system. And therefore, because it was a project that was revolving around the river, first we wanted to understand the water system. And we looked at the water system like we had seen it actually. This is, it's a river. It has like 6-7 different names as it's like moving around the geography. However, it's all the same water system, right? And what we have seen that, you know, all the industrial facilities were actually located around these water sources to be able to, you know, use them. I mean, historically, this was not something really regulated. So they were using the river channel as like a discharge channel. At the same time, they were using the water, you know, to cool off their engines and so on. So you can start seeing that kind of that relationship, why the industrial zones are located in the way they are located right now, right there, because there's water there. And the reason why that water is smelling, or there is lack of water, or like, you know, or the river channel is completely polluted, is also because of the industry. See, the reason why they are there and what happened right now is completely connected to each other. But you can only see it if you do the water system map, you know, kind of like the water system map gave us the industrial system map in there as well. That's the connection that they have developed over the course of the years. And then when we look at the green system, as you can see, all of the, because it's such a big area, we wanted to make as many layers as possible to be able to understand what's going on. We are working on the peninsula, on the southern part. And as we were looking at the northern part, we have seen that, the larger green systems are actually on the northern side, and mainly it's because they are the ones that are protected is because they are still like military lands and so on. But the ones that are around the industrial sites and the ones that are around the urbanized areas are completely broken, and they are right now really in very separate patches, and there's not really a continuous green system in here, which gave us the idea then, seeing what the problem is, like how is the current situation, and mapping that also gave us the idea, okay, where actually which parts require what kind of restoration, and how we can develop the patch corridor matrix for the green system for its continuity. Here again, you are seeing another layer, which is the transportation layer. Actually seeing the transportation layer, then it made much more sense. Like, as you can see, the very lower part, the Marmara' and also E5 Deyüz is passing through and like kind of separating the peninsula part of Tuzla from the northern part of it. And when seeing that, you actually kind of understand how urbanization, caused a huge sprawl, and how E5 there, or Marmara, is actually like a boundary between the green and the urban. And how do you overcome that, right? Like there's a artificial boundary there, which is like a road, which is placed there. So again, that the neighborhoods of and in which neighborhood is how big and how many people live in each one of them. Again, like there's another data layer. And then we zoomed in after seeing all these large scale, information. We zoomed into the area that we were working on, which is the peninsula. And here you can see with the black boundaries, the project site. And when we looked at the project site, like the first thing we wanted to understand, okay, like through which neighborhoods this part of the river is passing from, how is it connected, what was happening historically, where the settlements were. We read, theses, newspaper documents, like, try to understand, like try to get that data, the population, like, okay, which population is living exactly where. It's exactly like what Carlos was saying. So all of that research, the statistical data, the numeric data, the thesis that you read, the newspaper article that you found, the image that you have found, a historic photo or a historic map, all of that data, we take it and we put it on the you as spatial designers, you deal with the space, and you need to understand what that data means for you to be able to create a design proposal for that space. And here you see all that data. Some are numeric, some of them are mapped with the geometric, with the geometry of it on the space. And then here you are seeing, for example, the tsunami effect, like, if there was a tsunami in Marmara Sea, which would be the areas that are actually affected by it. So those areas are directly giving you like, okay, where you should propose these like gathering areas if there's like a natural disaster and an emergency. At the same time, this map is telling you where you should not really place any kind of building, but rather keep those areas in a way to function with water that is coming from the sea, right? Like they are more prone to receiving the seawater, which also means that, okay, if you are going to propose something in these orange areas, you are dealing with salty salty seawater, meaning the plantation that you're selecting should also be according to that. And again, you're seeing like the distances through the streets. How long would it take if I was to walk it? How long would it take if I was to bike it, right? This is just kind of like data, trying to understand that. And here then, all of this data that we have found started turning into proposals. We have seen with the circulation which areas were actually broken. And here we are proposing a circulation. And here what we have found that actually in the peninsula of Tuzla, there are 3 different kinds of water, which is the river, then the sea, and there's the lake, Tuzla Kamil Abdüş Gölü. And the three of them are very different water sources from each other, but the project site that we are looking at kind of almost is able to connect it. So our proposal to the municipality then was to create a kind of ecological infrastructure, which is at the same time a public space infrastructure, which connects all these three sources of water, but also connects all the circulatory routes, that connects all the ecological routes, and like and as you can see here, and also connects, you know, all of these areas recreationally to each other too. And here again, you can see those connections and what kind of programs can come if it's in the shore, if it's around the river, if it's around the lake, and how they can all be connected to each other. So what we came up with actually after seeing all of that information on the geographical space, we have found out those hidden relationships that are there. And, you know, at the very beginning, when we were looking at this project, we were not seeing any kind of ring in there. But after seeing that hidden relationship between the seawater, lake water, the river, and the circulation, and the transportation, and the disconnectedness of the green areas, then we have suggested a system that connects all of them, that connects the water, that connects the circulation, that connects the green spaces, and that connects all the public facilities, like, you know, any kind of public educational or administrative building, whereas also public support system buildings to each other with recreational programs. And we have gathered all of them. We have superimposed all of them within this system. And now this is divided into like 3 phases, and the first phase is under construction. But here, as you can see, all of those maps that we have done at the beginning to understand the site later, like gave the foundations to us as designers to create this entire system. And now we know what can be done in where, and what is the problem, or what is the potential of which area. This is completely, you know, the result of this design proposal is completely the result of that research through mappings. And here you can see a depiction of it, like, you know, it's a complete green corridor that starts from the sea, entering towards the river, and continuing like that. And the other project that I'm going to very quickly explain, which is like, you know, is using the same methodology actually, which is this one is in Catalonia in Spain, which is in a small town that is called Esparraguera. And this time we're looking at a previously like used industrial colony. And when we were looking at this, it was so this historic industrial compound that you are seeing used to be a textile factory actually. And here you are seeing a huge river running right next to it. So to be able to understand, like, you know, why this industrial compound was here, why it's not functioning as an industrial compound, what happened to it, why it's abandoned, how can we restore it architecturally, how can we restore its urban relationships and related to Barcelona, and how we can restore this ecologically, historically, but also for and provide like a place that is going to serve for the life today within because it's an area that is in close proximity to Barcelona. So we wanted to see the river was right next to it, right? So we wanted to see, just like everywhere else in the world, like, you know, the rivers and the industrial compounds, they have a huge relationship. That all of a sudden we wanted to see, like, you know, okay, we said, let's start from there, from the water ecology. And here, the map that you are seeing in the middle is actually showing us how this river is merging with other rivers, and later how it's like spilling to the Mediterranean by passing through Barcelona. So this actually, the shape of the river kind of created like an infrastructural channel that was starting from Barcelona, that was going towards the inner parts of Catalonia. And this river acted as an industrial spine for all of the textile factories in the like late 1800s and early 1900s in Catalonia. And as you see, like, on the map, which is on the left, Llobregat colonies. So all of the other industrial facilities, actually all of those small points that you're seeing, they are all textile factories. And they were located there because they, again, like, similar to the ones that you will be probably finding around Marmara region, they were using the water to cool off the engines, for any other chemical purposes, but also they were discharging the textile paints, like, any kind of coloring, any leather, similar to Tuzla, also Tuzla Deri Sanayi de yukarıda. So they were using the rivers like to discharge. So when you have a river, you don't need to build, they were thinking, a new sewage system, and you can just dump everything on the river and you can just get the water and, like, use that to cool the engines. So the river kind of like created a very cheap and very exploitable infrastructure for them. And then when you're looking at the transportation system, which is, the mobility network map that you're seeing, the mobility is also using, like, the railway and the highway is in parallel to the river. So they have used the river's course also as a transportation network, which also created a lot of pollution problems. But, it also allowed these smaller towns that are around the industrial colonies to be connected to the center, to Barcelona, much more. And when we zoom into the site more closely, the red area that you see is the industrial compound. And as you can see how the two rivers, like, it's kind of in between the two rivers and touching the other river so much than the other one. We have tried to map all the public, like layer by layer. We have tried to map like all the water system, the green system, the transportation system, how the surface water is actually accumulating there. We have mapped all the public facilities, the public buildings, educational facilities, the historic facilities, archaeological, remnants around. We have tried to map all of them to be able to then propose a kind of like system that is going to restore this with a new economy. And that new economy was, we wanted to create an incubator center in here, and because it's kind of like, it's really good connection to Barcelona. With train is like 35 minutes to go there, but at the same time it has all this nature and historic, valuable assets which needs to be restored, which needs to be maintained, but also their stories needs to be told too. So we wanted to use this area for researchers, for research and development as an economy, and also like for agrotourism and for archaeological and historic tourism too. And as we have zoomed into the site, like all of that learning from the upper scales actually translated later as a transportation system, like would be how actually we would, you see here the Catalyst Promenade, for example, where the main connections route will be, and how the public facilities, here you see them more with colors, will be also connected in those routes, so that we will be able to provide the connection to the larger scale public facilities too. And same goes for the natural systems. Like, as you can see in here, the landscape is working in relation to the natural habitats, are working in relation with the agricultural habitats, or the energy fields are at the same time agricultural fields. So two types of production is happening, but this is only possible if you know that the area has the, like, proposing an energy field is only possible if you know that the area has good sun exposure, and also it has parts that are windy, right? Like, without having this data, without mapping that, you won't be actually come up with the idea, or even if you propose it, it would be something probably that's not functioning. So it's really important that your research is really based on the scientific data, statistical, numeric, whatever data, and you actually, are able to invite then the designer who is going to be looking at your work to propose something that is within the dynamism and the constant fluctuation of Earth. And here you see the entire hydrological network and the ecological green system. Like this zoom in to the industrial area is completely in relation with the larger scale maps that we had done previously. And we can see, as a close-up scale, like how the program is changing this space, how the historic restoration will be changing this space, how the ecological restoration will be changing this space. All of a sudden, this abandoned industrial complex has a life that is much more different than to its current state. Having said that, now we want to show you two of the with Aura as like a warm-up for like a warm-up workshop. We also conducted 2 weeks on both of the semesters a mapping workshop, and maybe you have already seen them on the website, or maybe we had already showed it to you before if you worked with us previously. But we kind of wanted to show you, right, how actually maps could be layered, how they could be systematized, how you could get the scientific data and turn it into and translate it onto the geographical space. This is showing an example of that. This is, for example, Haramidere mapping. And this team, because it's the name directly Haramidere, right? It suggested they started looking at the water system. They looked at the current water channel, but they also looked at the geography. So they found out, how the water from the surrounding areas is actually flowing through there. They figured out the urban areas, which urban area, they got actually a lot of sections to understand the topographical change, so how the water is flowing. But they found out that all of these water routes, water channels, were at the same time the streets that are being used today as neighborhood connectors, right? And so all of this data on top of each when one of them is placed on top of each other is kind of letting you see those hidden relationships in between, or mapping all the green areas that are left over and seeing how in small, very, very small pieces they are, and how actually the river can turn into an ecological corridor to restore the entire green system in here. That's what we see. And the other one, and the other work was this one, for example, was kind of different. It wasn't as analytical in the sense of looking at all the layers of the geography specifically, but here in this work, which was focusing on Taksim Square, they have selected one kind of layer, which was the sound of the past, the past events. And what they have done here, for example, was completely abstracting the geographical space, and creating these points within the square and within the Gezi Park. And what they had was actually when a person is walking through that space physically with their phone, they were able to interact with those different points and just close their eyes and listen to what had happened back there. And this was just about listening and sound. And this was a kind of mapping that was interactive, and it was creating an experience with the person there. But their idea was that they were not going to be the one who's making the map, but the person who is going through. So the person who is going through this field is going to do his own map, right? So this person, and depending on the different points that he's passing. So this is can see in here as well, this is even though it's an experience that is creating, it is again based on data. It's about finding those events that happen, finding those sounds that are there, and it's related with that informational layer very, very much, and also like kind of like isolating that one layer.
But that is a really good example of how to extract the layers that you as a map maker think they have potential, or you're seeing a problematic in them, or whatever the reason is, that you are subtracting that layer from its environment, and you're presenting it in a different way for people or for future, future architects, that you need to think yourselves as providers of information, that they are some other architects, for example, some other urban planners, some other landscape architects, they can use and they can apply those into their work. And like that, they will have, or they will make much more wiser decisions, or much more informed decisions. I would say that I always like to say, like, imagine like a doctor that to provide a solution to something that hurts you, he needs to do blood analysis, he needs to do tests, CT scans, whatever is necessary to learn and to have a holistic view of the problem, and then you put the medicine, somehow, or you put the medicine, or you put the treatment to the issue. So this is a little bit the same. This is a little bit exactly the same. I would say we need to look into all the layers of information for them problems as architects. So I think that will be the summary.
Yes.
of the entire presentation.
So saying that, we can stop sharing.